know us, but for those of you who don't know BAIA, we are a volunteer-based non-profit business network. So basically what we do is we create opportunities and venues for professionals operating between Italy and the US to meet, network, discover business opportunities, exchange knowledge, and build relationships. We do this by organizing events. We also keep track of business activity between Italy and the US. We have a database called BAIA. We keep track of Italian businesses in the US and American businesses in Italy. And we also have plenty of online venues for business networking. We have, not only we are on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, but we also have our own social network, BAIA Link. So if you have any more questions on BAIA, you can reach out to me or feel free to go to the website. You will find plenty of information there. So let me thank Square Sanders for hosting us tonight. If you don't know them, they're an international legal practice. They are in 18 countries and they have 37 offices. I'd also like to thank Mary Trigiani for moderating the panel. She'll be introducing the panelists shortly. But I wanted to thank all of them for being here tonight. Thank you again. Thanks to Fabrizio Marcelli, who's here tonight representing the Italian consulate in San Francisco. And last but not least, after this event, we'll be meeting at Empire Tap Room for drinks. We have a reason to celebrate, and if you know Nancy, you'll know why they have a reason to celebrate. So thanks again, and enjoy the event.
No, the only reason I belong to BAIA is so I could hear my last name pronounced correctly. I grew up in a little town in Virginia, long story, but we wound up there when I was 9 years old, and I didn't even know I was Italian until we moved to Big Stone Gap, Virginia. So, and our last name has been pronounced in myriad ways, so. But we're not here about that. We are here about online privacy, which, as we all know, is a huge topic right now. And I can tell you, after preparing a little bit for the last week and talking with these three gentlemen, that we could spend an hour or two with each one of them alone and kind of only begin to scratch the surface. They have each come at it from a different perspective. I mean, you know, I think it would be great if we had the kind of conversations nationally and globally that we've had the privilege of having the last few days. And so we want to kind of continue that. This is going to be fairly informal. I'd like to kind of start and have everybody, have these gentlemen talk a little bit. I'll ask them questions and I kind of keep it structured, make sure we get on to, stay on topic a little bit. But by and large, we do want it to be, take advantage of this nice space and the fact that we can hear each other without microphones and have a good conversation. So one of the things that I've come across recently in my work is the fact that we're not in the information age anymore. We're in the networked age. I don't know if you all have seen that. A lot of companies are talking about, they kind of refer back to the industrial age, and then the electronic age, and then the information age, and now we're networked. So I guess when I was hearing about the information age 20 years ago, I thought, okay, that's it. That's that. I'm in the information age until I retire or, you know, leave the planet. But no, now we're networked. And again, these three have something to do with that. So I guess the biggest question we're going to tackle tonight is whether in this networked age we have to redefine privacy or keep privacy what it is and establish new boundaries. So to help us answer that, we have two digital immigrants. That would be David on the end and Alessandro on this end. And in the center we have a digital native. So have you guys heard that expression before, a native and an immigrant? All right, so a digital native is kind of grew up with the technology that we have today, or at least an immediate precursor to it. The rest of us might have been introduced in high school or college to the use of a computer on our desk. But at Glancy, of course, and with Andrea, it started probably from the day you were born, right? But they're all digital pioneers because they all came to the U.S. from somewhere else. So what that means for us is that we kind of get a global perspective, not just a national one. Alessandro Acquisti is a newly tenured professor at Carnegie Mellon in the Information Technology and Public Policy group. So that tells you something right there. It's not just technology, they're also talking public policy. David Cooke is the Vice President of Analytics at FirstRain, which is a private company, and they deliver customer and industry intelligence to their customers and clients, which are businesses, so they're a B2B company. Andrea is a scientist who has studied the movements of city dwellers, and in some really interesting ways, in a variety of projects, and he then turned that into another company, that kind of interest of his, which was Glancy, which was a location-based app. We'll talk about that in a minute. And Facebook just bought his company. So we're lucky to have him with us. We're excited about that because we're going to take him with us for a little cocktail at the Empire, beers at the Empire Tap Room, and then he gets to go off to Facebook where they're having, can I tell them this?
Yeah.
A giant slumber party to which none of us is invited. So no sneaking in, no making nice with Andrea to get over to Facebook because it ain't going to happen. He just has to go over there by himself. So, you know, one of the things that has happened, and we talked about this in the last few months, is, have you heard of Path, which was sort of an offspring of Facebook? Path is a smaller network where you only invite 150 or so of your closest friends to see your timeline on Path, and it was developed strictly for mobile. That was a Facebook employee who then went on to create this. Well, they had a big snafu a few months ago because it was learned that they were uploading people's contacts from their phones into a database. And so they had to do some fancy dancing, which they did very well, and they came out with a great privacy statement. Then about the same time this was happening, President Obama started talking about a consumer privacy bill of rights. And then those of you from San Francisco know that in the last few days, starting tomorrow, there are 10 or 15 bars up in San Francisco that are going to be doing what Alessandro has done as a research project. They're doing for business purposes. They're mounting cameras in about 10 or 15 bars. It's called Scene Tap, and they call themselves a nightlife startup. And they're using facial recognition technology to gather data on bar patrons. And people are getting a little crazy about it. So that is not what Alessandro does.
We do worse.
You do worse, right? He's an economist by training and profession, and he began to focus on the economics of privacy when he was taking his PhD at Berkeley. And what he studied was how people make decisions and the degree to which they value their privacy and where their own biases come into play, correct? So what he has done, if you haven't had the chance to look at the BBC report that is on BAIA link and on the event page, please check it out because it's a very interesting report. They created, I'm going to read this to you, they created an experimental smartphone application that is capable of snapping a photograph of a stranger's face walking down the street. And then they process that photo, they compare it in online databases, and then they generate that individual's social security number. So these guys, and they didn't do it for fun or money, they did it so that they could say, this can be done, and we need to be thinking about it. And as Alessandro told me, we're now living in a world of social science, not just information science and not just a society. So he wants us to think about how how economics intersects with technology and also influence, which is one big part of that. So let's talk a minute about the facial recognition study, if we could. How, you know, the BBC story that you can go and see is very interesting, but in talking with you, it didn't really capture the reason that you did it. They were kind of focusing on the fact that you did it. Can you tell us in a few words why you did it and
Sure.
what inspired you?
So the application seems like what a computer scientist would do, and I was collaborating with computer scientists, but I'm really a social scientist by nature. I'm an economist who got interested in behavioral decision research, how people make decisions about protecting or sharing personal data, which led me naturally to be very interested when social networks came around. And we started doing some studies about MySpace and FirstRain, and then when Facebook arrived in 2004, we found that it was a fantastic experiment in the wild of self-disclosure, because Facebook, unlike previous networks, was fully personally identified. Because when it started in 2004, it was connected to a very bounded geographical community, Harvard campus, then other college campus. So we started trying to understand what people were revealing and why, what they were not revealing and why. And back in 2005, when we published the very first peer-reviewed paper on Facebook, we listed a number of potential troubles for privacy that in the long term may arise. And one of the troubles we were mentioning was face recognition, leading to very sensitive inferences about the individuals. Precisely because now you have a social network which use faces of people with real names, not pseudonyms, not nicknames, not fraudsters profiles as in FirstRain. So it took us a while. So 2005 took us only about 6 years to do the study.
And how many people were involved on the team?
A little army of God bless RAs, research assistants. So we had, I took authors, Ralph Ross and Fred Stutzman, who are postdoctoral students at CMU, but we had probably 15 to 20 RAs. Because we did several experiments. In one experiment, we tried to see whether you can take publicly available Facebook images, and I refer specifically, without even getting inside Facebook, what of a Facebook profile you can access from a search engine, being Google. So we use the primary profile photo that people make available, and we compare it to images coming from dating sites, where people do use personal photos. If you don't get the date, but they don't use their real names. They tend to use pseudonyms. So we did it for a specific geographical location, and we tried to see what the overlap between the two sets was. And we were able, using this approach, to identify 1 out of 10 members of the dating site. The second experiment was about setting up a kiosk on CMU campus and asking people who were passing by whether they wanted to participate in an experiment. If they did, they sat at the kiosk, we took a picture of them with a webcam, and we asked them to fill out a survey. As they were filling out the survey, we were in fact uploading the image up to a cloud computing cluster where we were comparing in real time to images from Facebook profiles. If we didn't find a good enough match, on the last page of the survey, the person, the subject, would dynamically see updated a set of images that the face recognizer had selected as likely to include the person's face. They would ask the subjects, do you see yourself in the photo or not? And using this approach, we identified 1 out of 3 of the subjects in the experiment. So we thought about pushing the envelope with the third experiment, which was about a story of data accretion. Like capital accrues over time, if you are good with your investment, data accrues across databases. So the story became a story where we developed an iPhone app. Strictly, we wanted only to use publicly available data and publicly available technology, because we wanted to do something that anyone else can do, but in fact, the larger organizations can do even better than what we did. So this iPhone app does exactly what you described. takes a photo, tries to find a photo online which has a name associated to it. If there is a good enough match, then you have a presumptive, so probabilistically correct name for the anonymous face in the street. With the name, the script then looks for public level of information associated with the name. And once again, it's a probabilistic search. If your name is John Doe, good luck. Your privacy is protected by the crowd. If your name is Alessandro Acquisti, much rarer name, and you find the right information. And specifically, we look for demographic data. When you're born, the date, and which state. And then, if we did find that information, we use an algorithm which we developed in another paper which we published in 2009, which predicts social security numbers starting from publicly available data, which is another example of statistical identification data mining. And we predict the SSN, and we send it back to the phone. So that now there is a face of the person and the SSN and the name presumptive, probabilistically correct name of the person on the phone. And we call it an example of privacy in the age of augmented reality. Because social security number is just one of the things that we could have done. You can imagine going around and trying to infer the credit score of the person in front of you, the sexual orientation of the person in front of you. I mean, this is something that human beings have done forever. Evolution has taught us to gut feeling based infer information about other people as we meet them. But now we are creating technologies which create another channel for which we infer sensitive information about each other.
Alessandro, you said that anybody can do this, but anybody with the technical chops to do it, right? So do you have any sense, since this became public, how many, if there are startups out there that are going to do your app? Because you guys have said, no, we're not selling it. This is purely for research purposes. Are you aware? Is anybody doing it?
No, absolutely. So they are not doing the last step that we did, the inference of sensitive information. But there is no technological, and in fact, I would say, currently legal barrier from doing that.
So how did you guys do
it? The boundary is a boundary of self-restraint, self-regulatory restraint, because the fear is that if a company tries to do what we did, predicting extremely sensitive information about you just from your face, and sell it as an app, it will be an enormous consumer backlash. However, the history of the last 10 years in social media tell us that privacy is a 2-step forward, 1-step backward dance. You do something invasive, public reacts negatively, you stop, you wait, you do it again. So right now, no app does that, although technologically they could.
Is there?
10 years from now, we meet again and we see where we are.
See. Which is the perfect segue over to David, your fellow panelist, because he and I were talking about this. You were talking about self-regulatory, which touches on ethics, and as David told me, he's interested in the great good that can be done, which, Alessandro did this. I think it's a great good that he did for us to show us just how far things have come. And so David was pointing out to me the other day that this is really an opportunity to start a global business conversation, because our friends in Europe are really looking at this much more closely, and they're hammering a lot of our companies. They're hammering Google pretty heavily right now. And so but let me tell you a bit about David first before we kind of hit that road. He's grown other high-performing global organizations outside of his current company, which is FirstRain. So he's been with Cadence Design Systems, Microsystems, Sun, and Fairchild Semiconductor. And at FirstRain, what he's doing is working primarily with sales, marketing, and finance specialists, those functions inside their client companies. And his role as Vice President of Analytics is to ensure that what they're doing, what the products are doing at FirstRain are kind of aligned with what the customers need and want. So, there you'd have a great opportunity, right, David, to just kind of, if somebody said, I need somebody's social security number, you guys could figure out how to do it, but that's not obviously something that you do, correct?
Yeah, we go out onto the open web and we look for content related to companies and the sort of markets that companies operate in, the business lines. We provide that intelligence, and it's all that out there on the web, and we aggregate that and give that to our customers. And we differentiate between business content and consumer content. And, what strikes me as we look at this is that we could push the boundaries of usage of information about what data people enter into our system and what we find, but we choose to run an ethical line in this because we sort of think that when companies operate, they can't just live within the scope of the law. You know, if companies hide behind we operate just within what the law does, it means they're like many years in something new like data privacy. You can get away with a lot more because it hasn't been legislated yet. And so my belief is that companies have a responsibility to operate in an ethical way and set a standard that's higher than what the law dictates, because that's good for society, it's good for the company, and it's good for evolving the business. I think when we were in 2008, when the financial meltdown happened, there was a lot of people who just hid behind, we could sell a loan that we knew people couldn't pay for. And I think it's the same now with digital privacy. It's not about what you can get away with, it's about what is morally ethical to do.
David, what's the great good that can be done with, for example, you're helping customers collect and organize data. What is the great good in that?
Well, so there's several things. We provide content to people, and when they come to us, we don't know. We may have an email address, and we may have a job title. So we can start off by knowing what, we can differentiate between like a salesperson, a marketing professional, a portfolio manager with a financial company. And based on that information alone, which is sort of declared information, we can create a targeted feed of information for them that's delivered via an email or an RSS feed in a way that knows the type of things that salespeople are interested in, knows the type of triggers that happen that might facilitate a conversation. So if a salesperson called up a customer, if they knew something was going on at that customer, like they just had a reorganization or they just opened a new branch of Home Depot in a particular town, the person selling to Home Depot would know that, and so they could have a conversation with them. So what happens is that the more we know about the customer, the more we can give them value faster, right? They don't need to codify all their, and customize the channel information. We can provide it faster and easier to them. So what it does, it lubricates the workflow. The second thing is, as we notice what they're clicking on, we can make sure they receive more of what they found interesting in the past. All right? And I think those are good things to help, that they're using observed information to provide a better user experience. But we collect that data with the intent of using it for that purpose and not using it for other purposes.
Do you ever find that a customer asks you to do something that should not be done according to the scale that you described a minute ago?
We find a lot of them. So the answer to that, I can't remember being asked to do something unethical by a customer related to the information we were providing. But there are some grey areas where if you notice a subscriber doing something, if you talk to a salesperson, a naive salesperson, they'll go, well, when I notice the customer reading an email, I want to call them and see if they want to buy.
Okay.
Or if they're in a trial situation, we go, no, that's not the way we as a company want to operate. We want to have people see value and then get some interaction. And so it's easy to use these processes for people just to do naive and sort of unsensical type of things with information. And I think, and none of this is legislated. It's all part of a company working out what it wants to be known for and how it wants to operate. And but I've never been asked to do anything unethical by a customer in terms of content.
Well, and again, it's in defining what's ethical and what isn't, right? We're still testing that a little bit.
Yeah, and we do quite a bit of business for financial companies, and we're ruled by there's a financial regulatory authority called FINRA, and they sort of regulate what people are allowed. Even individuals, you know, we have to firewall certain content, and that's very important to do. So that it's not just companies selling data sets to others, it's actually protecting that data from people in the company who don't need to see it
from the ones, right? So kind of putting up some walls.
Yeah. Do you want
boundaries?
Yeah. Do you want your so let's say you're a salesperson. Do you want your salespeople seeing the precise searches the customers are doing? I'm not sure we do.
Okay. Andrea, prior to this current phase of his life, has dealt with, and I think you're still interested in the digital footprint that we all leave behind, correct? So David's dealing with the digital footprints of his customers' clients, and so now I'd like to hear a little bit, and I'd like you to share with everyone what you were telling me the other day about the projects that you've done, because they're kind of a larger scope even than that. They're not around the transactions between companies and customers. Yours are kind of about society. Let me just tell you that in 2009, Andrea was at the MIT Sensible City Lab, and you worked with AT&T, correct? Okay, so this is super interesting too. During the presidential inauguration, when President Obama was inaugurated in January of 2009, and they created a tool for capturing the movements and reactions of the crowd. You know, remember that big, huge crowd there in front of the dais? And through that work, they were able to depict who was there, when they arrived, where they went, and how long they stayed. And so that then has led to, you know, and Andrea kind of keeps morphing that whole kind of social aspect, or almost like, how, I was trying to describe it to myself, it's like where tourism meets art and where people communicate with each other. Is that accurate? Is that?
So the idea of the research I did was to study society and cities, how city functions and how they evolve, and how city dwellers move and behave in cities based on all the kinds of new data that is available and that has become available in recent years because of technology. Okay. Unlike some of what has been discussed so far, when I create a Facebook profile, I voluntarily put my picture online. And when I navigate and surf the web, I know that someone knows that I'm visiting a website, and we all know more or less that someone is taking notes. But we may not think that every time we walk by and we have a cell phone with us, the telecom operator knows where we are. When we swipe our Clipper card, the city knows where we boarded and when we ended our journey, our trip, and so forth and so on. And all this kind of data can be used to study how city functions. So yeah, it's society and how, for example, public transportations and in general tourism and mobility function in big cities, and how they are disrupted by public events like Obama's inauguration day and so forth. So the whole idea is basically of using what we call digital footprints, being footprints because they are something that we leave behind without realizing we're doing that. And so the Obama project was one of them. To be clear, we actually didn't know who was there, not because it's not possible, but because we chose not to even have that data available as part of the partnership with AT&T. So we would get anonymized. We knew part of the phone number, enough to know where a person was coming from, so basically the traffic. And so with that, we were able to understand which countries and which states within the US were more interested in the event by looking at the cell phone activity and how it changed between before, during, and after the inauguration day. And by looking at how the activity changed and when it spiked and how long it took to decay to the normal levels again, we were able to understand how long people stayed in Washington. And by looking at handovers, which are, it's basically a transition. If you move while you're on the phone, at one point you will be out of reach from the cell phone tower to which you're connected. And so the telecom operator will have to transfer your call to the next one. So by looking at those, by looking at that data, you can understand very well how people move. And so for example, I did that as a test. I actually didn't publish anything about it, but Manhattan is interesting because it's very well delimited with respect to the other boroughs. And if you look at the handovers between their cell tower and you compare them with Trump, they have very precise car counts for every bridge.
Because they count on the bridge.
Yeah,
wow.
So there is a perfect correlation, almost perfect correlation. So that was one idea. And cell phone is not the only one. I use the Flickr data as well. So now Flickr is not as popular, but it's still fairly used. And all pictures are publicly available, almost all pictures. And every picture now comes with a timestamp and coordinates associated with it, because pretty much every camera has a GPS integrated with it. And all the pictures are associated with the user. Now, most users don't actually put a real name, but they fill out some information, for example, their nationality. And so another project that I did was to study tourism in Italy by comparing how people take pictures and comparing nationalities and how they do it. So, for example, in Italy, most American come and visit the major cities, and there is this elephant. If you plot the paths that they follow, they literally just visit mostly the main cities, and so they go to Rome, and they go to Florence, and then they go to Venice, and then they shop in Milan, and then they go back. And if you look at the Europeans and Italians, then it's a net that it's much more widespread. Because of many reasons. We know that there is a lot more in the countryside, and we can go multiple times. So by doing that, you can see at the country level which places are more popular, and then you can zoom in within a city and you can see which hotspots within a city are more popular, and then you can compare and see where do people that visit Rome come from, and where did they go after that. And that's another type of information.
Sure.
We are taking pictures, but we don't think about how people can use those pictures to actually study the way we.
You're looking at it from 30,000 feet and looking at the trends.
Well, yeah. What's interesting is that you can really zoom at different scales. So it's interesting when you do city to city analysis. It's also interesting when you zoom in and you look more precisely within a city what happens. So, for example, just to stay with the pictures, there was an event, a public art exhibition in New York. It was called the New York City Waterfalls, and it was a public project in 2009, financed by Bloomberg, and they installed 4 basically huge scaffoldings in the Hudson just to attract people towards Manhattan and north side of Brooklyn. And the idea was to generate economic activity. But they didn't have any way to actually measure how many people went there. It's not like in a museum where you measure how many tickets is sold for an exhibition. And so they went to look at things like how many hotels were booked in the area. But they also came to our lab, and so I analyzed the AT&T data and I analyzed the Flickr pictures, and I was able to compare the tourist activity before, the summer before that, and that summer. And one thing that was very interesting, so if you know, Google measures which pages are more popular by looking at links that go to that page. And if the page that is sending a link is very popular, then that's even more important.
Right.
So we did the same for places. So we defined areas within the city, and every time someone took a picture there and then took a picture in another area, there was a link, basically.
Oh.
And so we created a graph of the city And running pretty much the same algorithm, we were able to understand which, it's a centrality measure of a graph, and you can understand which areas are more popular in the sense that sooner or later, someone will basically pass through that place. And by comparing the centrality of, for example, Battery Park, the summer before and the summer of the New York City waterfall, there was a spike. And so you knew that there was actually a benefit in having that installation there.
Wow. The last thing I want to ask you, and then I want David and Alessandro to answer this question too, but Andrea, what scares you? Anything?
Well, actually, no, but it's not because I was born with computers, because I actually didn't have a computer.
You're a digital native.
No, but I actually, I'm not really. I think I started to use the internet fairly late, actually, compared to some friends. But for me, it's actually quite simple. I think privacy is actually an ill-defined problem. And if you ask anybody here, they will give you a fairly different definition of what is privacy. But what's more interesting is that probably in a week from now, they will give you a different opinion than what they have today. And I think if someone wants to do harm by invading your privacy, they can do it anyway. And it's pretty much impossible to stop it, because we live in a society where if you don't want to be tracked, then don't use a cell phone. But I want to see someone not actually use
It's
a cell
part
phone.
of being social.
Yeah.
It's part of living today that you have a cell phone, correct?
But at the same time, for people that use it for business purposes, there is a very clear line, in my opinion, between what you should do and what you shouldn't do, because of, again, consumer backslash. If you do something that is just wrong, then it would be bad for your business, so you're not going to do it. And that's as simple. That's why you don't disclose information about what search queries your users do. It just doesn't work. And it's the same the other way around. If something it just invades my privacy and doesn't offer any value, you're not going to do it. And if something is pushing the boundaries of what I'm comfortable with, but provides me more value than what I think I'm giving out, then people will do it. And Glance is actually a good example, because a lot of people freaked out when I explained what it does, but there were people that actually liked the idea of being able to connect with new people, and they thought, me letting someone know that I'm nearby, it doesn't really invade my privacy, or it does, but at the same time I think I'm getting more than I'm giving, and so I will do it.
I tried glancing when I knew that you were joining us, and it was interesting to kind of look at who was in my neighborhood and then shut myself off really quickly.
And you see, that's it. If you don't think there is enough value, then you're not going to use it.
I mean, I love this stuff, so I don't worry about it that much. David, does anything scare you?
Yeah, so just a comment on what you just said.
Okay. No, yeah. Go.
One of the things that happens is that I think if companies want to last for any decent amount of time, they are moderated by what you just said. But there are companies that don't last for very long, that do push the boundary beyond what is acceptable. And it's those that I sort of worry about.
Can you name any specific example, or?
I don't know of any exact ones, but that's probably why it worries me.
Okay.
Well, the true answer to your question that I was going to say was that, one of the worries I have is the models we use to model people are models, and they're rough approximations to actual behavior. And as a result, they can get it wrong sometimes. And what concerns me is when people get it wrong and they get a piece of information, say about me, that's wrong in the system, how do I go and fix it? Because we live in an age where data, I don't know what data people have, and I don't know who they've shared that data with. So being able to track and correct pieces of information is a big problem. And this can be as very simple as where I live. So I live on a street, and it's I live on a street called Quinn Hill Avenue. If you go to the bottom of the street, there's a sign that says Quinnell Avenue. If you go to the other end of the street, it says the same thing. If you look on the county parcel records, it says the same thing. For some reason, the post office thinks I live on Quinnell Road. And they've sold that database of my information to many other people. So whenever I buy a product and they say Visa and you fill out it complains about Quinnell Avenue because it thinks I live on Quinnell Road. I do not know how to fix that problem. Right?
Wow, and you're in the business.
It's a very simple problem, but they've sold that database of my private information to many other people, the post office. And so now I'm just forced to like go along with it, and I tell the Visa company I live on Quinnell Road. Not true.
That's a fairly benign issue. Alessandro,
yeah, it's benign, and it is, but there could be other things.
We'll turn it over to questions shortly, but Alessandro, what scares you? Anything?
Well, I'm not. I don't want to be scared and also frame it as from a perspective of scare, but I am concerned in the long run because privacy is about control, and only the current debate, I think, got control wrong. We keep talking about privacy as control over personal information, when in fact privacy is about the protection against the control that others can have over us once they have enough information about ourselves. In fact, most of my work is in behavior decision research and economics. It's not face recognition and computer science. Many of our experiments highlight the kind of cognitive and behavioral biases which may lead people to reveal much more than they really want because they are constantly nudged into disclosing. And in fact, paradoxically, by giving us ourselves more control or just simply making people feel more in control of their personal information with granular privacy settings, for instance, you have the paradoxical outcome that the individuals start taking even more risk and even more sensitive information disclosure. So privacy is not about control of personal information, it's about protection from the control that others can have over you. And what worries me is that more and more of our personal and professional lives are happening under this constant sight of these omnipresent third parties which are observing us, monitoring us, accumulating data, and then using this data. And this usage, right now, is benign. In the long term, we don't know how much we will be influenced to do. I don't think that really the scenario in the future is 1984. That's not what scares me at all. Okay. There is no economic advantage in 1984. The big brother is not profitable. It's more how Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, a world where we are consumers, happy, but in fact constantly manipulated, influenced in a way which we don't even realize. Because in a way, marketing has always existed. But right now, we are on the edge of a level of influence of consumer behavior which is unprecedented, because I can know so much information about you, and I can influence you in manners that not only you don't realize, but you don't even see. And this is what worries me.
But is it possible that there will be money in helping people protect their privacy in interesting new ways? Can we expect startups to emerge that will help with that?
There are some, and indeed,
not the reputation plays right now, but
what gives me hope is I'm actually, although I'm not a digital native, I've been very in love with technology and computers since I can remember. I remember playing Ping back when I was, 6 or 7 years old. Do you remember Ping, the video game? So I'm a strong advocate of privacy-enhancing technologies, also known as PETs. What sometimes makes me, tickle is when I hear data sharing and data analysis as orthogonal to data protection. Like, if you want privacy, you cannot have all these benefits coming from social media, data is the new oil, and big data. I find it a false dichotomy, because in fact the best privacy enhancing technologies developed by researchers here in the Bay Area, MIT, CMU, and so forth, allow data sharing while also data protection. There are so many examples. We have anonymous payment systems, which are more secure than current credit cards because they rely on something better than identification through numbers which are shared with other parties. We can have things such as oxymoronic as it may sound, privacy-preserving data mining, and even privacy-preserving targeted advertising. We have great technologies in the labs and sometimes used by a small number of people. We still don't have them in the marketplace. I hope that will change.
That will change. There, it sounds like there's money in it. Let's start with questions. Do you have one, Vicki? Oh, I'm sorry.
No. For younger people, like teenagers, of which I have one, you raise them a certain way to do the right thing, but then somebody else can share information about them, maybe a photo, and it just seems that could ruin their life. And so it's kind of what you were sharing is that, you get something out there, and then how do you correct it? I mean, I love social networks. I've been an early adopter myself. But those are the fears that I have as like a parent who's trying to do the right thing. I mean, it seems like it's a free-for-all out there. And I just wonder, I love the fact of what you're doing. I think it's really interesting from a business point of view, but there's just things that are happening now so quickly. Like how do you navigate and help young people to do the right thing? And I mean, is there anything that you actually can do today?
Any
today,
ideas or suggestions?
in 2012?
Andrea? You.
Well, so if
And he's speaking for himself, folks.
That's another lesson.
So there are, if you put a picture online and you're drunk in it.
But let's say somebody else puts it of you. Let's say
Yeah,
you don't want to
exactly.
share
Okay, yeah.
photos.
No,
Somebody's
yeah, that's
taking
what I actually
photos
meant
at
to
a party,
say.
and you're all of a sudden you see something online. It
Yeah,
hasn't
so
happened yet, but I'm
if
thinking-
It will.
employees know you get drunk sometimes. If they don't hire you because of that, you're probably better off not working for that company. If you said you were sick, and then someone uploads a picture of you at the party the night before, then you deserve to be fired. Twice, because you lied and because you're an idiot that you got caught so easily. But
So tell the truth, and you probably will not get in trouble no matter what you're doing.
well, yeah, I think so. Of course, it's not as simple, but
Right.
there are Facebook. Again, I'm talking as a user, as a functionality actually, where you can ask someone who uploaded a picture of you that you don't like to take it down.
Or you
And
can prevent it from happening at all. I've done that, right? People can't. There's a function where you don't.
Well, it's
upload
impossible
to
to
you.
block someone from uploading a picture.
Okay.
And
You can prevent them from tagging you. Yeah. Correct.
you can remove your tag,
Right.
but the picture is gonna stay there, and you can ask the person to remove it. And if they don't, you can actually ask someone at Facebook to review it. I think.
There's an appeal process. What would you say to a mother?
So I very respectfully, although disagree with Andrea, I feel this is a kind of a variant of the privacy is only if you have something to hide. If you have nothing to hide, why you worry? But in fact, you may have a need for protect information which is good about you. You may not want people to know your income because it can be dangerous in the wrong hands. Or in the case of discrimination, it's not just a picture of you drunken, which suggests a certain behavior which a firm may or may not like. It may be the picture of you entering a church or entering a mosque, of you kissing a female or you kissing a male. And people react to this information. Discrimination exists. So it doesn't have any impact on other people's decision, whether we like it or not. We did some studies. As an anecdote, part of our experience with the face recognition, one of our subjects told us before filling out the survey, "Oh, you will never find me because I don't put photos of myself." Sure enough, after 20 seconds, we got it.
20 seconds?
Yes, because the application was we were working with small databases, only up to
okay.
hundreds, thousands of images. It was not scaled yet to millions, so hundreds of millions of images. And we found because a friend had uploaded a photo. Another study we did, which was about behavior decision research, was because we were very interested in this question. How, let's say that you do something slightly silly now, and there is evidence of that 10 years from now. Is it the case that people will say, well, you know, this information is 10 years old. Yes, he was drunken, he was smoking pot, he was doing such and such, but it happened 10 years ago. It doesn't matter any longer. We were curious to test whether that was correct or not. So we created an experiment where we provided to our subjects a story of Mr. A. And different subjects in experimental conditions saw a different version of Mr. A. In one version, Mr. A was reported as having done something really good. And this really good either happened 6 months ago or 5 years ago. In another version of Mr. A, he did something very bad. And once again, some subjects saw that this happened 6 months ago, some other subjects 5 years ago. And what we found, which is somewhat depressing and gloomy, I don't want to send everyone in a depressed mode, but the good information about Mr. A was very quickly discounted. So that if we told Mr. A did something good 6 months ago, our subjects like Mr. A a lot. But if we said that Mr. A did this good thing 5 years ago, as if it never happened. It's like, you know, me telling you, or Mary telling you, I won this award for privacy research. If she tells you this was 6 months ago, you think, oh, Alessandro is good. If she tells you this happened 5 years ago, okay, what has Alessandro been doing in the last 5 years? Whereas the negative information about Mr. A, not discounting, regardless of whether it was 6 months or 5 years ago, it negatively and significantly affected people's perception of Mr. A. It's part of the things we are trying to understand in terms of how information about you will change the impression that others will make of you over time.
And that cuts back to the behavior focus of what you
Which is most of the work we do, yes.
So what is being done in terms of, there are opportunities and threats. So you have the opportunity of mapping that facial recognition image to somebody's social security number. So that could be an opportunity to sell your solution to the Department of Homeland Security and to capture terrorists in an airport, say. And the threat is that somebody could use your information, but then you also have an opportunity to develop countermeasures, whatever type of shield you could use. So is there anything that's been done in practice in either area?
I completely agree with you, right? These technologies are per se neutral, and then they can be used even on the individual level. This iPhone app, which we didn't make available, you can use it for creepy purposes to find out where someone lives and follow them, or know information about them and use it against them, or for, you know, you go to a party, you never remember the name of the person, and now from the angle of the room, you can know the name. Hello, Mary. Or the store. You enter a store, and the store recognizes you, makes you feel better, more welcome. Or maybe they connect to your profile, and they estimate your willingness to pay for a certain good, and they decide, okay, to this consumer I want to offer the cashmere item, and to this other another item. For each scenario, you can imagine the good scenario, the bad scenario. How do we know in which scenario we will live? It's either self-regulation, companies self-restraining and using for the good purposes rather than creepy one. It's consumer reaction that keeps firms honest, or it's perhaps regulation. And we are still at the beginning of this technological explosion, and we don't know exactly in the long run which will be the more appropriate model.
Oh, Aurora had a question.
Sure.
I have a question about what you were saying before. And so did you find that by people sharing more information, we tend to then keep to our groups more? Or do you feel like we're becoming more tolerant, knowing that more people have?
That's an amazing question. We are running a study right now about that. We still don't have the answer. I'm very curious about that because you make two opposite stories. Mm-hmm. If you take as an example, we are in an Italian association tonight. We are hosted by an Italian association. There is research suggesting that immigrants become more judgmental of other immigrants. So you have a situation where people in your group, you look at them more negatively if they make a mistake, because you think, I had a hard life here. Why are you not as good as I did in earning my keep in here in the United States? There are situations instead where the in-group creates kinship, positive emotions, and we don't know really whether the fact that you share maybe embarrassing information about yourself online will make you more judgmental, or in fact more emotionally connected to other people who may have shared the same. We don't know. This is exactly one experiment which is ongoing.
There's a total book in all of this.
I wanted to, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to add something about actual uses of these type of technologies. Casinos are have extremely sophisticated actually mechanisms to study how people are behaving inside the room. Use infrared cameras to detect your temperature. So if you're counting cards or you're trying to cheat the system, your temperature is going to go up. They have cameras that track the pupils to understand whether you are a casual player or you're a professional player. They study patterns of where you are in the different sections of the casinos. That's just the beginning. They really have extremely sophisticated technologies. And I guess that goes back to the point that privacy or the value of information is just economical value. There is benefit in doing something. When it doesn't, it's not beneficial to the company or the business, probably they're going to stop doing it. Another example, there is a company, I actually know one of the founders, that is trying to use satellite images to detect how many cars are parked in the parking lot of a mall, for example, to estimate how much business they are getting. So imagine if you were able to measure how many cars are parked in front of every Walmart in the United States over time. You could detect whether they are selling a lot or they are selling less, and so forth and so on. And you could use that information to bet in the stock market, right? Potentially. Telecom operators can find out if two companies, they know actually exactly where a company is located and where another company is located, and they can track the volume of phone calls between two companies to detect if something is happening, for example, a merger or a partnership, and they could use that information. I don't think they do, but in theory.
You're saying it's possible.
Yeah. And the last one is actually one that I attempted to do, and it was actually my previous startup. I worked there briefly. We were trying to use cell phone data, so cell phone network activity, to detect anomalies in terms of cell phone traffic. So let's say that here, normally, there are 3 calls an hour from a cell phone. And then all of a sudden there are 20 now. Then that means that something is probably happening. And so we developed a system that was able to detect these anomalies and reroute that information to the police department of a city. So the customer would have been the police department. And if there is a patrol car, for example, they could dispatch one to check. And we were actually kind of successful in detecting certain events. For example, if a train breaks, we were able to immediately know that because everybody on the train would immediately call the families to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to be late.
Or an employer could use it to see how many people are on their cell phones all day, right?
Well, yeah, to a certain extent, yes. Of course, if you live in a building, there are so many people, and in a city there are so many people connected to the same cell phone tower that there is only that much you can really infer about the individual. So there is you can understand enough about an area or an aggregate group of people, not as much about the individuals. So these are all things that have been done already. So.
Wow. David, anything to add to that real quick before Matteo? Sorry, I've been putting Matteo on.
So I just had a comment on the person you had a child. It was, I think it's a tricky situation when you've got kids because they're the digital natives. So they don't know what the downstream consequence of anything they do is. And they live in the naive world of just where they are. And I think, there's a couple of things you can do. One is, I think we have to become aware what is being said about us. And I think there is a commercial opportunity for an application that finds out what is available out there about you and sort of makes you aware of it so you can then do something about it. Because if you don't know if there's something out there, then you have a problem. I think on Facebook there are some challenges because there are, there may be, Facebook may not be around forever. Young kids are now using SMS. They're using different technologies to communicate that they think are less sort of logged in that respect.
Right, more private.
Yeah, more private. And it may come down that the next generation of application, the next generation of company, might be less profligate in sort of tracking this information. And so there may be, just like you said, there may be a rebound effect due to the amount of information that's tracked at the moment. There may be a rebound effect with the next generation of applications. I know for myself, in the work environment, I noticed a Facebook entry of someone at work, and they'd been on a pub crawl and were drunk. They just wanted to take a picture, and they hadn't posted it on their Facebook. Someone had posted it on a group ID inside Facebook, and he was very concerned about that, and he de-tagged it and contacted the person to take it down. Fortunately, he was able to do that, and that was an indication. What he was trying to do was he was concerned that his Facebook identity actually does affect how people perceive him in the work environment. He wanted to keep his private life separate from his public life. And I think more people may start doing that, where they operate on this. They either try and keep people not putting bad data on their Facebook, or my sister-in-law uses a pseudonym. She works in the medical profession. She's a doctor. All her patients are out there on Facebook. She doesn't want them tracking her, so she uses a pseudonym. And I believe that's a common technique used in the medical profession, in the teaching professions, to not be tracked.
And we hope with some politicians who are on Twitter. Mateo?
Yeah, so the comment I had and question really for everybody, each one of you, because all of you sort of even started with this, is this idea of this elastic boundary, or sort of I should say plastic boundary, because plastoelastic. So it's a little bit elastic, but also plastic over time, right? And this idea of self-policing, or rather of a system that is, if you want, that has checks and balances built in. So if I think about the U.S. Marketplace, the American marketplace, or the American society, I can see how there are these checks and balances, because consumers can have a voice. If they aggregate in a large enough number, they can change the direction of what a company is doing because they have enough clout to bring the press with them and so forth. This does not necessarily apply to another place or another country, right? So this idea that companies, that this mechanism exists is predicated on the fact that there is this kind of, counterbalance at every level, at the individual level. So you can make this decision, you can ask the company to do that, and also the aggregate level, or companies to companies, company towards the government. There's no power that is so strong that it can sort of obliterate the others. So what about other, situations where you don't have that check and balances? Is the solution then only regulation, right? So I wanted to hear a comment from you. If you put yourself in a situation where you don't have that kind of elasticity.
It's just a personal opinion. It's unclear to me how regulation can cleanly approach this, because when you're dealing with the wide variety of personal information we have, that is both the facts and the inferences from the facts to create a sort of inferred perception of a customer or a person, it's not clear to me how you legislate that and can track it and audit it across country lines. And so it's a perplexing thing for me to work out how to do it in a way that understands the grayness of what people are trying to do, because people have been creative. And as Alexandra pointed out, you can do great good and you can do great harm with the same information. And if you start, how do you have a law that says you're allowed to do great good, but you're not allowed to do great harm? How do you sort of legislate that? And I think that's a problem. So I just don't know how regulation is up to the level of doing it. I think companies have to, at some level, companies have to take some responsibility to self-regulate and be very clear about what they're doing, and to be allow people to have that visibility to what they're doing. So that's just my perspective.
Gentleman in the back's been waiting a little bit.
Giovanni Acquisti from LinkedIn is a company that actually has a lot of information about people and has a principle of member first, which is to say that we have very high standards on preserving that trust, because that's what feeds our engine, so to speak. I have really a question that's about kind of the longer term trajectory, and is, if you look at the history of privacy, it has been a progression, right? I mean, if the story is true that at the beginning of the century, last century, the telephone was put in the hallway because people didn't want to take phone calls in their bedrooms. I mean, things have changed from there. So if you think about, 10 years from now, right, in which you are in a trajectory, where do you see the privacy landscape going? Considering the fact that there's huge benefits to the economic system, to having this information used and monetized in many ways, right? Not just for selling stuff to consumers, but also to improving the productivity of organizations, for improving our energy efficiency, for a whole set of things that have to do with a lot of.
That's a great question, because we live on this. Because these companies are happening, we're benefits of it in this geographic area, correct?
Absolutely.
LinkedIn last year, Facebook tomorrow. So how would you answer this question?
I try. On the economic angle, I would say, perhaps repeating myself, that privacy and asset technologies do offer a solution that allows to extract the benefits of data sharing and data analysis while preserving more privacy. Now, as economists, I also know that there is no free lunch. So whenever you start aggregating data or anonymizing data or de-identifying data and so forth, you have a decrease in the utility that you can extract from the data. In fact, this is also a name. It's called the RU function, risk utility function. As you decrease the risk of a data set, of a re-identifying data set, you're also decreasing the utility. The interesting question economically is for which party are you decreasing the utility? If you start developing and deploying more privacy and asset technologies, are you decreasing the profits of data holders, or are you decreasing the surplus or consumers, or in fact decreasing aggregate welfare? We no longer discover the cure for cancer, or no longer we can charge $10 rather than $8 to this consumer. And we still don't have good answers for that. And I feel that economically, as economists, we should investigate that. As a social scientist, not economist, but more behavioral decision research, looking 10 years out. And this is why, by the way, I thought your question was amazing, but so difficult to answer. It's related to this. I really wonder how much of our need and desire for privacy, which goes together undeniably with the need and desire for sharing, connection, even publicity, even bad publicity, how much of that is socially constructed and how much of that is universal. There is evidence that the need for privacy can be found across cultures and times. There is also lots of evidence that it takes very, very different forms. And sometimes it almost looks like completely absent. In other cultures, it seems completely dominant. What is interesting to me is where is the balance? How much is socially constructed, how much is universal? And this may help us address the question of where we will be 10 years from now, 20 years from now.
So I have a very pragmatic view on both issues. If there is a country where consumers don't have the power to, get back to a company that is misusing their data. I think that the country probably has bigger problems than that to fix, and so nobody's gonna think about, oh God, this company is misusing my data, because there is probably they are doing much worse in general. And about what's gonna happen in 10 or 20 years, we're probably gonna have even more data. I think one type of data that we don't have, I don't know if it's going to be useful for LinkedIn, but it's affective data, so our emotions and how, we know everything about our demographics now and where we are and who we're with, but not about how we feel. So that's probably something that is going to become possible in the future. But again, even LinkedIn or any other company that has this data, if they put consumers first, I don't think that they need even to think too much about how public perception is going to change. As you have new opportunities, you have to decide whether LinkedIn as a mobile app, they could easily use it to collect data about the location of the users if they wanted to, but they probably don't do it because it doesn't have economical value to them.
And just to clarify, the question comes up all the time, not about mobile, but in general, what is the balance between the privacy of our members and the applications we can provide to them?
Yeah.
Well, but that's good in itself, is that at least these questions are being asked, right?
Exactly.
Inside companies.
Right.
So I'd say, if I look 10 years out, the good will get better. If you look at the shopping experience with Amazon 10 years ago versus now, it's much better now. You get targeted ads coming to you. It's recommending stuff that is close to what you bought in the past, right? And it's of interest. So I'm just confident that good will get better. I think the new generation coming up, the digital natives that you mentioned, they're going to test the. I'm just conscious that my perception on privacy is a reflection of my experience when I was born and the things I've gone through. The digital natives and the youth of today is going to test that and push that and break some of those boundaries. So I'm going to have to get used to having more information out there that's known about me. It's just a factor of the way it's going. I think some content will go extremely private and some content will go extremely public. And one of the ways to regulate is to actually take some specific things and make sure they never go and regulate that and let the rest go free. And so the law will probably be driven by the egregious violations as well.
Do you know the story of, sorry, I don't remember if it's Walmart or, anyway, the pregnant teenager. Yeah.
Yes.
No, sorry.
Target, yeah. So basically they were able to find out that the teenager was pregnant before parents by looking at the purchasing behavior. But yeah, I mean, is that privacy violation? Yes, at the same time, are they going to stop? I'm not sure, because in the end, it's probably...
She's pregnant.
Well, first of all, she was pregnant, so they got it right. But also, there's probably value.
It's a fact.
I wonder if, Alessandro, your comment about how bad information about a person stays forever and good information has a half-life that's pretty short.
Well, that's human nature, right?
Well, I wonder if that's going to change, because you won't be able to get elected there'll be no one to elect as a president or a politician because they've all got something that's noticeable.
And this goes back
as
to
an Italian, disagree. You can get elected if you have something
but I think
better.
it's going to force
Some
people
countries
to I think that may have to change because there won't be anyone left.
Oh,
you can easily imagine how 20, 30 or 40 years from now, social networks can have all these opposition research services because they have so much information about all the silly things you were when you were young. But going back to the question from the lady there, I think that your question about how it will be over time intersects with the issue of when more and more people become comfortable with sharing certain information, even embarrassing information, even silly, how this will change the impression of information on others. And it's an open issue. And some things we can try to emulate, simulate in experiments in the lab. Some things you have to wait 10 years.
Exactly.
Well, on the other hand, it's easier to share negative stuff about you with people who have the same negatives. For example, if you're an alcoholic, you want to connect with other recovering alcoholics. You're not going to put that on your Facebook, I'm a recovering alcoholic, but you might want to tell, you might want to say, okay, everybody else who's a recovering alcoholic, and define this in their profile. This is actually part of an app that I wrote on Facebook. You can find each other, or you're a drug user or whatever.
Wow.
So it's
That's
sort of,
an interesting way to think of it.
yeah. Yeah, it is. It's a way for people to connect who otherwise wouldn't have any other.
So you're creating like private connections.
Yes. Well, no, it's not
That's
private
a-
connection.
A community.
It's something that's in
Or
your.
discover connections and surface them only if they're relevant
Yeah.
and approved.
And not show them to
Mutually
everyone, but show them to the people.
Only those where there's an intersection.
I think that's a valid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Massimo has it.
No, I just wanted just a couple of comments. And first of all, as a father, and also to respond to her, I think actually we have fantastic tools today. I mean, when I was 14 years old, there was a whole lot of crap that I did that no one knew.
Exactly.
Right, and
Massimo, you've got
my
4
kid-
to keep up with, right?
Right, and so,
So
my,
you need technology.
my daughters, I could be freaked out all day about what's out there. Actually, it's exactly the opposite. They know exactly that everything they do could be completely public. You know what? When you know that everything you do could be on Facebook the day after, you're gonna be watching out a lot more than we
It's
ever
sort of
did.
like living in
But
a small town.
Yeah, totally. But the
Is that a good thing though?
Absolutely.
Is there a chilling effect?
It is. I think it's absolute. I mean, I tend to be a glass half full guy, but I think it is really. When you think about it, it is absolutely a good thing. But you hinted to. I mean, the real issue here, I believe, and you hinted to that, is discrimination. I know so much that as an employer, I know so much about you that I'm not going to hire you, and I'm never going to say this, but because I know something that, right? So, but really, if you think about 10 years down the road, the fact that all this information is available, actually, I believe, again, thinking positively, reduces the discriminating factors. Because the dialogue on homosexuality or anything else becomes so mainstream that it's a lot easier for everybody to deal with certain things that before were discriminating factors because typically were unknowns and you're scared by things that are unknown. But on the other side, on the economic side that you were mentioning, like think about healthcare. Discrimination in the healthcare industry with all the information available could be humongous, where I'm never going to cover you because I know so much about you. So really, in terms of economic policies, for example, it really pushes the world to a place where there are certain areas where you simply cannot allow discrimination, and therefore, simply the private market has no place to be. And healthcare is a perfect example. Really, when you take it to that level, I as a private company, I'm never going to choose, knowing that what I know now, I'm going to know everything about you. Why would I ever do business with you when I know exactly the risk I have? So there are certain industries where probably the humongous amount of information that we have will have to take probably the private market outside of it, where we're just going to say, you know what, it has to be provided to everybody, because otherwise there will be, the de facto discrimination. So anyway, I wanted to see what your thoughts are about some of this stuff.
Personally, I find these profound issues very important. I often try to think about the same issues, and then sometimes I hit questions where I stop and I no longer have an answer, such as what if the job market and the health market start intersecting, and the company, based on data mining, know purely from your online profile or else that you have X probability higher than most of your peers, so developing Alzheimer by the age of 50, and they decide not to hire you. So is that free market in practice, and we want that because it's maximum efficiency, or is it a problem we should be worried about? My training as an economist may suggest something. Many other things I learned suggest another answer.
Actually, you don't even have to connect the two. You can just have healthcare plans that are more expensive if your genes are of worse quality than your person. And they actually started to regulate this, but in my opinion, if a healthcare company starts to do that, it's probably going to be economically inefficient for them.
I want a healthcare company that rewards me for being healthy.
Yeah, well, genetically healthy, like, do you think?
Well, not genetically. No,
behavior,
not genetically.
Yeah.
But you could turn that around. For example, as an employer, I know you're extremely talented and you're going to have Alzheimer's. You know what? To win you over, I'm going to hire you and I promise you to take care of your wife. Like, you can take everything and look. Seriously, think about it. Look at it as a glass half full. We now all know that I'm going to have Alzheimer's when I'm 50, and I'm tremendously talented. Okay. So I'm going to go work for the employer that, knowing this piece of information, is going to offer me a solution for the problem I'm going to have 20 years down the road.
You should go work for, J.P. Morgan.
So just a quick thing. So some of those observations you just mentioned have a probability function about them.
Right.
And so you're condemning the situation that you put down. It's like condemning someone because they have a probability of getting Alzheimer's. It's not that they're going to get it. It's that they stand a 10% chance of getting it more than the rest of the population. It's rarely cut and dry that one not the other. It's a very grey area, and so I think there's real problems when you start making decisions like they're binary when they're actually not binary decisions to make. And the second thing is I do see your point about where there may be a public role in being an intermediary in the selling of health insurance to protect the consumer from the health insurance company. And so they may have the data and choose which data to use and which data not to use. But because that's elected, there's some moderation in that. I think the discrimination aspect is an interesting one as well, because you could argue that what information out on the net is doing, it's just allowing people to do on the net what they do in reality. So an employer looking up a Facebook account of someone who's applying for a job, is that much different than the person doing the interview sending his admin out to look at what car the guy drove into, or the person drove into the job interview, and see whether it's clean, right? Is it just the same thing with a different medium?
And also there are, of course, the usual attributes that I think are much more important. If a person is good looking, it's more likely she's going to get the job, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything else. And it is actually demonstrated that every inch of a man, not women, I think, is $10,000 in salary more every year on average. Good for me.
Beautiful Italian.
And the other one, which is more interesting, they asked a group of women to rate a group of men, pictures of men. So they rated them, and then it turned out all of these men were being accused of, in the past, of being rapists. And guess what? The more attractive they were, the less likely was that they got a sentence, or the sentence was lower. So it just happens, and it's impossible that it's not going to happen because we are human. It's a Disney that teaches you.
You just said it. It's the human condition. We have a lot to work on.
That's why we have government.
And
to protect us from ourselves.
You
could argue that. You could argue that.
I think. Well,
I could argue that. We have governments to protect us from ourselves.
We have governments to serve us, correct? You're a new American citizen.
It really depends what you want to optimize for, right? It depends what you want to optimize for. What are you optimizing for, right? Is health, for example, a product or a right, right? I mean, that's a fundamental question. You can go back all the way to that, right? And then everything, is privacy an absolute value or is a product?
Or a feature, or
that is supposed to be traded
and
priced.
And priced.
I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. Absolutely.
Well, I think they're good questions. I'd also state that it's easy for us who are familiar with the digital world. To your point, Massimo, that you said that your kids know that they're being tracked. How many people using Facebook are that aware? Right? there's a lot of people using Facebook that have no idea what information is being used and that they're tracked. And I think the issue is not protecting the people who know, it's what we have to do to protect the people who are unaware and unconscious.
That's great. Do you have anything to add to that,
No,
Alessandro?
just as a follow-up to Matteo's point, economists distinguish between final goods, goods that you value precisely because of them, and intermediate goods, which you value simply because they lead to something else. And privacy, the problem is that it is a little bit of both, because some people value it simply because, I want to protect my privacy, and some others, and sometimes it could be the same person, just in a different scenario, want to protect the data precisely to avoid a specific scenario, price discrimination or discrimination. And when you have the two goods, the two nature coexisting in the same good, it becomes very challenging, difficult to assign a precise valuation to them.
I think there are also things, I think the point about healthcare is the right, that an affluent society should have a certain level of healthcare for everyone. Or should it be just a price thing that you buy into? I think each country's got to decide where it wants to be on that framework. Each country's got to decide what it's going to have as an acceptable norm in the way businesses are going to operate and how they're going to use such information.
We have two more questions, so I'm going to go with Aurora first, and then Alvaro.
I wanted to say something about all this data collecting and sort of imagine how people are gonna react. And the Alzheimer, example. I don't know if you are familiar with Viktor Frankl, A Man's Search for Meaning book. Anybody here? He was a psychiatrist that spent time in a concentration camp and wrote a whole theory of psychology based on the meaning you give to your life influences the way you're gonna react to events. And so I feel like all this discussion takes away the fact that we can't predict how, for example, if you tell a man you're going to have Alzheimer's when you're 50, maybe he's not going to want to have a company. Maybe he's going to have to travel the world. Maybe he's going to want to kill himself. Maybe he's going to want to not be married. I mean, how can we take that in consideration? It feels like this whole discussion takes away that's sort of what you decide to do with the life you've given your meaning.
It depends on the situation in a lot of cases, is what you're saying.
I'm saying that the way you react to a situation, we don't know what that will. You have this sort of freedom, and all of this discussion is taking away that that's sort of very individual, and we can't account for that.
That's a profound point. There have been some studies showing how if you get kids, I'm just recalling my memory, maybe a little hazy and fuzzy at the edges, but experiment with kids, female boys and girls, and if you do a test, mathematical test, without priming them beforehand, maybe the girls will outperform the boys, for instance. But if you prime them beforehand, suggesting that girls usually do worse at the kind of test than boys, girls will underperform the boys in the test. So this is the power of priming, telling you something that because you belong to a certain category, you will perform in a certain manner. So where you're going, and I think it's very interesting, and I definitely want to think about it further, is that as our ability to analyze data and make predictions about individuals will get better and better, no doubt, they will never be perfect. And we have to consider how, as we make predictions about others, our behavior towards others will change, but also their behavior, once they know that they're being predicted to have certain characteristics, may change as well. It's
so self-fulfilling prophecy.
I fully agree with that, because you don't want the prediction to become reality just because it was predicted.
Yeah.
Its prediction is a probability, and there's a certain number of people who that won't be true for.
Yeah.
And so do you taint everyone that has that prediction with the end outcome of the reality? And I think that's a wrong thing. But that's bad for society. And I think it actually doesn't do justice to the true nature of who we are, and that we're individuals. We're not just a number and an outcome. And so, we have to be able to be the one that isn't. If you have a 49% chance of getting Alzheimer's, it's okay to be one of the 51 who doesn't, right? and you shouldn't be treated like you got it already. Right?
Great question. The last question from Alvaro.
So I sold encryption solutions for 8 years for PGP and Symantec, and we had marketing people paid a lot of money to come up with the scariest scenarios about privacy issues, so we would scare the hell out of people into buying our products. And you guys have scared me twice as much as anything I ever. Amazing. But you can look at my face and find my social security number. It scares the shit out of me. Okay, so is there anything you do yourselves, 1 or 2 things each, to protect yourself? Do you shred your junk mail? What do you do to protect yourself?
That was my exact closing question. This is so great.
Is there anything
Alvaro.
very simple, just simple things that you do, your little paranoid thing? Don't put a hat on the bed. What do you do?
Any of you guys have anything to share?
On the contrary, I share as much as possible. I don't mind. I know also there are pictures on Facebook that they wouldn't like.
Really?
Yeah.
There goes my invitation to you to Facebook.
No, I have my email address there and my phone number actually. It's on my website. And,
Don't you get a lot of spam because of that?
no, actually. No.
It's interesting. And that, not to interrupt the flow, visit their websites because they're all very interesting. How about David and Alessandro? What do you do to answer Alvaro's question?
So a number of things, but there is something in behavior research called rational ignorance. That sometimes it is rational to remain ignorant about certain issues because you know that the cost involved in becoming learning will offset the actual benefit you can expect. So you can imagine a similar scenario here, where if you really want to protect yourself from every possible instance of invasion, you're not going to do anything else in your life. You cannot function as a normal human being. And you know what? Even if you do everything right, your data will still be analyzed even without your knowledge. So you have to draw the line and you do practical things. I am on Facebook, but because I joined Facebook after being for years on MySpace and Friendster, where I was a pseudonym, as most of the people there on Facebook, please don't help me. I don't use my real name. And I use my photo as a helmet, a motorcycle helmet. My friends know me, can find me, and that's how I want it. I don't like other entities to know me and find me.
On Facebook.
Why don't you want?
It goes probably back to subjective preferences for more or less privacy. I'm more clearly from what you may have observed. I'm more on the I like privacy.
Yeah, but so define they add you as a friend. You don't accept them.
I'm sorry.
So these people, they can find you. They add you as a friend on Facebook. You don't accept their invitation. What's the harm?
Oh, if people, I do accept on an individual level, obviously. I just don't like anyone being able to find me.
It's his own personal boundary. It's the
And
line
I
he
think
won't
that's
cross.
acceptable. That should be an acceptable thing.
What
Should be allowed to be anonymous.
Oh,
So that's.
I was wondering what the value.
It could be
The value of
generational,
the system would
right?
be
It could be
Oh, it
generational.
is.
Yes.
You are not concerned about some pictures. It didn't, in fact, prevent you from
But I
being
do.
a sustained
I am
position.
concerned. I just gave up with
And
it.
of course, so
Get
the
rid of
acquisition
that.
didn't happen because they knew you were an egregious fellow, right? They didn't give a shit about the pictures, did they? Because there was much more economic gain to be obtained through your CEO. So was irrelevant and possibly generational. Possibly for these folks and me, generationally, we don't know how to deal with it. It wasn't the way we were raised. Not a DNA issue. It's a societal, cultural issue. Our cerebral network is wired differently than yours.
That's
Like
next.
financial
Right,
data,
Nancy.
let's get off Facebook. We can be
Well,
public,
somebody
but
tried to do that.
yeah, well,
There are
lots of
companies
people
who did
hack
that.
into banks and so
They do
on, but.
You publish your purchases, your credit card purchase. You plug in your credit card into a website. And the website streams your.
Well, there are dating websites that
Limit.
allow you
Yeah.
to put your income. And actually, if you do,
Well, don't do that.
if you do, you get more dates. You do get more.
Well,
If
depending-
you have-
depending
if
on-
you have Nike.
You know, Andrea, we're we're just gonna, you need to do a blog with all of this.
Teachers.
Exactly. This is great. The whole dating website thing, fascinating. David, what are your tips?
I suffer through the generational issue with the products. I would say the main thing is just to be aware of what's out there. So if you've got a Facebook account, look at it often. Make sure you know what's been said about you. If you've got a LinkedIn account, look at it often, know what it's been said about you.
Learn the features of each network,
yeah,
correct?
Yeah, just don't live in ignorance. Because then if something happens, you can take care of it quickly. If you can know who put that picture on, you might be able to get it off. Just practical aspects there. And then the other thing is not to use all the digital ways of interacting as an excuse for not actually getting out and meeting people and talking to them. Doing the traditional stuff of building relationships. Often people substitute that from having real life. I think you've got to have a balance, and I think you've got to use technology to help you, not as a replacement for living. So use it in a wise way. That's mine.
That is a fine note.
I buy everything on cash.
Veronica, would you like to close things off, or do you want me to do that?
I just a closing thought. I think it's very interesting how a lot of this has to do with perception as well. I was just noticing how Facebook came up a million times in this conversation and Google never came up. And if you think about it, Google knows more about you or any other search engine than your wife or your mother because of the searches you do, right? So, but anyways, thank you very much. It was really interesting.
Thank you.